Okay, so welcome all, and I have a short agenda, which should leave time for talking. We've got a recording actually from Chen Yang, who's in China right now and having internet problems. So he's going to give us a 5-minute update on ONE development in the last few months, which is interesting as he's moving into the whole dietary survey formalization. So I will now get that video rolling. And I believe that's it. Yeah. Okay. So.
Hello, Damian. This is Duccio.
Oh, hi, Duccio.
Hi.
Good to hear from you.
Good to see you.
Actually, just one thing. Are there any new people on the call? Doesn't look like it at the moment. No, so we won't need introductions this time around. Okay, so I will now start the share with Chen's intro, and that means share screen and QuickTime Player. Share, and hopefully this gets relayed well. I've never actually played video relaying out to the world, so let's see how this goes. You guys can give me feedback if it's not comprehensible.
My dear colleagues, first of all, I apologize that I couldn't join the meeting today. This is because the software is currently not accessible in China. But I still would like to share the new update of the Ontology for nutritional epidemiology, because during these days we really make some update and include a new list of terms. So I would like to firstly introduce the project that I'm currently joining. This is a project called. It's a project, European level project, and the name of the project is. Name of the project is an integrated approach to the challenge of sustainable food system, adaptive and mitigatory strategies to address climate change and malnutrition, a systematic project. So this is a European level project, and there are about 50 different universities and research organizations there to do the same project. So as a researcher during the project, our researcher group is responsible for the description of food-based data guidelines and standardization and of the relevant information. So since I have the background of ontology, I'm responsible for the ontology regarding the food-based data guidelines. That's why these days we introduced this new list of terms, and here you can see in the GitHub repository of the ONE, the Ontology for Nutrition and Epidemiology, I have posted issue and list the relevant terms that we would like to use for the project. I have to say this is just the first draft of the terms, and we are also going to have several discussions in the project. There are about 40 different researchers from different organizations currently contributing to the project. So after several discussions, we would finally select a list of terms and include those list of terms into the ONE, the Ontology for Nutritional Epidemiology. So this is actually one of the very big update of the ONE. So apart from the existing list of terms regarding the description of nutritional epidemiological methods and the nutritional epidemiological manuscript description. We would also include the new list of terms in our ontology in order to describe the food-based data guidelines. Also, we also yes, we also I also posted an issue in our joint food ontology working group. The main reason is that I really want to avoid the overlap. In case there are some other initiatives who are going to who has this list of terms in their ontology, we would like to borrow those terms from the existing ontologies. Yeah, because this is why we have this joint food ontology initiative to check the overlap. I think it's the best way for us to really integrate different kinds of ontology and to avoid the misuse of ontology terms or the wrong choice of terms over different ontologies. So, okay, here I have given a short introduction of the mean change of the ontology for nutritional epidemiology. I would also include all these URIs in the email, and all the comments and suggestions are very welcome. We are looking forward to your suggestions and comments regarding the food-based data guidelines, regarding the list of terms and where we should put this list of terms, the hierarchical structures, etc., etc. So thank you very much, and hope you would have a very successful meeting today. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Right, so that's from Chen Yang, and he isn't available on the call today precisely because of the whole internet connectivity. He's looking for feedback, so what I'll do is I'll drop, just for those of you who might not know, I'll drop the ONE GitHub repo URL into the agenda that's in the Google Doc, so you guys can link in that way for feedback on the terms. Okay, it's really neat to see yet another big project take hold with our ontology effort here. That's looking forward to hearing more about that one. Just on that note, I know Francesco. I don't know is Francesco on the call today? I can't see from the.
Yes, Damon, I'm here.
Oh, okay. You and Paul Castellano were having a bit of a discussion with Chen about organizing your related domains. Do either of you want to comment on that?
Well, yes, the discussion is quite lively, let's say. I mean, it's quite interesting to see how we are exchanging view on the position of the various term and on the definition. So if anyone wants to join, it's highly welcomed, obviously, and basically it's happening everything in the tracker of the work group. Basically, it started with Chen asking or proposing, let's say, okay, so you can see me while I'm speaking. So basically it starts with Chen proposing some way of finding interactions and connection classes between those three ontology, which is the ONS, the ON and E, and the biomarker, the FOBI ontology. And so we discussed a bit on which classes could be used to make the link respecting each ontology domain and scope. And I think more or less now we are at a good point. I mean, we sort of defined a set of 5 or 6 classes, more of those will be included into the ONS as some sort of more general ontology towards the nutritional studies domain. And then the biomarker will, let's say, be linked by one or two tailored classes. And so if you want to read about it in details and obviously participate, let's say, you can read it. And I have to say this was quite nice as an interaction, and was quite in line with maybe the whole scope of the initiative and the whole point of the initiative. So I'm quite happy for this integration and exchange of ideas.
Yes, I love to see how you folks were negotiating your domains and also confronting challenges in defining things like metabolite, food metabolite. And we got into a little bit of a discussion there about ways that one can approach these things, either by using roles in ontology or by actually looking at the capabilities that an object with a role actually has, which makes it viable for performing that role. So there are different ways you can actually approach some of those technical problems. But anyway, yeah, really, really excited to read on about that thread you guys had. Okay, any other comments about that?
And I comment, because it's today I had an additional thought regarding these networks of interaction at the levels of the different ontologies. I was on a Skype looking at data on gene expression as correlated to diet, and again, the ontologies were used to evaluate enrichment in ontological terms into the gene expression data. This is something that it's going on since 2001. I was one of those developing the first tools. And again, I had to notice how much it depends on the boundaries of the ontology to get a correct p-value. And what people still does, they include the number of genes that contribute to a different ontology, and they calculate that. And that, in a few seconds, you have a tool that integrates ontologies on gene names and associates them with nutritional concepts. Like we're looking at fiber consumption and checking out which ontologies would pop up from nutritional trial where fiber was in greater amount. And the key point was exactly the definition of how you measure the correlation between the outcome. And in this case, we're talking about short chain fatty acids levels in the blood, okay? The fiber input and the gene expression. And I thought about the different ontological layers and the importance of accounting for the biotransformation. Because you're talking about something you get from the diet, and it's not defined if it's cooked, if it's uncooked, if it's fermented food, where it comes from, what are the microbes that are taking care. So regarding to the discussion that we are having also with Francesco on the ontology for fermented foods, we realized how important is this work of interconnecting things, and actually the linking of the gene ontology with the other ontologies. In my opinion, it's something where we should work on at a much more in-depth level, because these analyses are still going on, and there is a certain amount of imperfection that could be perfectioned by improving the ontological notations. So this was just a comment on this work.
That's great. Yep. And so that opens up creating all of the metadata, in particular around the food consumed. And we've been doing a little bit of work on that with USGA, defining initial processes that are applied to food that still leave the question whether consumers and various other user groups would define the food as raw or preserved or cooked. So that kind of vocabulary and having a flow chart around all of those possibilities is something I'd like to work on and get feedback from. Maybe I'll present it next month after it's gone through another iteration. Any other comments from folks? Okay, so next up, have Anoosha Sehar, who's been working diligently on the plant times plant organism and fungi times an anatomical part component of food on. And we've told you about that in the past, this organism table, but Anoosha's prepared a wonderful slideshow that actually gets into the different kinds of foods and the distinctions that are made there. So I thought you folks would probably enjoy her presentation, and so I take it away, Anoosha. Let me see if I'm sharing here.
Thanks, Damien. Yeah, thanks, Damien. Hi, everyone. My name is Anoosha, and just to briefly introduce myself, I'm working in Chow's lab at SFU in a capacity of graduate research assistant, and have joined this lab last year. And I'm mainly working with Damien on food on. And from my background, I have my master's in computational science and engineering with majors in bioinformatics, and have then worked in public health for a couple of years. So basically my interest is in working in bioinformatics public health. So today I'll be discussing about organismal food organization. Just let me share my screen. Just give me a moment. So I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, full screen.
Yep. Okay, so I've actually made this slideshow brief and simple, so it could also be easily understandable by even those people who are not actually directly involved in ontology. And me and Damien are working currently on organizing all the organismal foods and connecting food quality to them. And the idea behind this organismal food organization is to basically have a primary entity in food on for basic food products that are part of organism, harvested plants and fish mainly, in a way that we would have a whole term which would be equivalent to any plant or animal part from which it derives and its NCBI taxon. So for that, we have created a new robot table that provides the plant and animal part into organism. That is essentially actually the first layer of food products. I'll be discussing about few challenges here and what we're exactly doing through examples. Now, the first challenge which we came across was that organismal material table can't actually create new terms. So we had to manually add new basic food whole terms or have to locate the existing ones in food on. So we are aiming here to add new basic food whole terms, like suppose apple whole, though there are existing whole terms already present in food on. So we are also locating those at the same time in food on, like this plum whole, which has already its food on ID assigned in database. So for that, we need to identify an organism anatomical part and also have to ensure that it's present in food on organism part facet. Under the part of organism facet class in food on provides selective terms from anatomical ontologies for biological anatomical parts, as well as plant and animal part references. Like body part and body product terms we are mostly importing it from Uberon ontology, which is an integrated cross-species ontology covering all anatomical structure in animals. For example, like we are coming up with the part terms like sea turtle leg whole, chicken leg, sheep liver, etc. Similarly, for plant anatomical parts, we are mainly relying on plant ontology, which actually provides a controlled vocabularies for the plant-specific knowledge domains, which includes plant anatomical entities, where it deals with providing a vocabulary for plant morphological and anatomical structure representing plant organ, which could be like stem, leaf, and root. But it's quite a broad ontology, which also gives like plant structure development stages, like growth and development stages in plants, which includes like processes like flowering, germination, seedling, etc. But right now here we are only using it for plant anatomical entities in Foodon, for specifically for this organismal table. Similarly, FLOPO we have used as a source ontology. FLOPO is for flora and phenotype ontology, which deals with the traits and phenotypes of flowering plants. And when I'm saying that we are talking about an anatomical part of the plant or animal, that means that from which actually the food product or its major ingredient is derived. For example, like pineapple whole, it is a fruit multiple from a pineapple tree. If you see in this picture, a young pineapple, in appearance, this plant actually has a very like a short, stocky stem. But when creating its fruit, it usually produces up to like 200 flowers, although some large fruited cultivars can exceed this. Once it flowers, the individual fruits of the flower join together to create a multiple fruit. And that's why we are calling it like as a multiple fruit. And this ananas cosmosis is its NCBI taxon. Similarly, other example of fruit multiple are figs, jackfruit, etc. So it's mainly to give you an idea about how we are picking the anatomical part of any plant organism. Similarly, if I give you example of a jackfruit, it is also a multiple fruit because it is derived from joining or merging or ovaries from many individual flowers. And each carpel actually represent an individual flower, and the entire cluster of few carpels plus its fleshy stem axis, it's called a multiple fruit. If you see this one, which is the figure which is actually cut lengthwise, you can see the interior, which is composed of like several seed-bearing ovaries, and this each bump, or you can say that this pointed protuberance on the exterior represent a single flower or carpel. And as I said, that the cluster of these carpels is actually make a multiple fruit. So here in organismal table, we are dealing with different terms and having different anatomical parts from where they are derived. So this is, so just to give you more clear understanding, I have another example of lemon to show. Lemon is actually a Hesperidium fruit of lemon plant. These are the definitions which we are actually creating from axioms based on anatomical part and by also merging the taxonomy. Hesperidium, according to plant ontology, they have defined it as a berry with a leathery rind. Like which actually develops from a superior gynoecium and at maturity comprises a thickened exocarp, mesocarp, and endocarp, and also has its parts like juice sacs on a carpel. And in picture, you can also see this leathery rind and this thickened exocarp, thickened mesocarp, and these layers endocarp, and also has parts, these juice sacs on a carpal section. So all citrus fruits are actually classified as a Hesperidium and are characterized by the presence of this outer skin, you can say skin or rind. So after this plant part and animal part, the third part of organism, which we are covering here in organismal table, is fungal structure. A fungus is actually a member of any group of eukaryotic organisms that also includes microorganisms such as yeast, molds, as well as more familiar like mushrooms. We are using FAO ontology for that, which is fungal anatomy ontology. So far, it's like a structured vocabulary for the anatomy of fungi, you can say. So far, we have only only food body is used, which is the reproductive part, which is usually the above ground portion of a fungus or a mushroom, which is usually harvested. Around 65 mushrooms we have already been added in the organismal table along with their NCBI taxons. And of course, we are aiming to increase it with more mushroom terms. And for example, like cultivated mushroom, we can now actually define it as a like fruit body of a cultivated mushroom fungus, which is Agaricus bisperus. According to FAO, fruit body or fruiting body is any specialized structure which bears or contains sexually or asexually derived spores. So this is how we are dealing with all the fungi terms right now. Um, Other than moving on, other than adding these new whole terms and after identifying their anatomical part, another thing which we are taking care is taxonomy, for which we always prefer NCBI taxon. That there were different kinds of terms when we were actually which we actually came across, based on which we have tried to manage these taxons. So far, only new and existing whole terms who have missing taxons in food on. We are adding that in food on plant or organism, that organismal table. For example, like if you see in cases like apricot whole, in apricot whole, there is an NCBI taxon available. So on that basis, we could make it equivalent to that. Like it's a drupe fruit and it is derived from Prunus americanum, Armeniaca. So similarly, this is one of the case where we actually had NCBI taxon easily available. But if you see in case of pear whole, the pear tree and shrub are actually a species of genus Pyrus. So here for taxon, we have used Pyrus in subclass Axiom, and it's because pear is a very generic term, and I think around 3,000 known varieties of pear are grown worldwide. It could be either one of them. So for the terms where like one-to-one mapping is not possible, we are using genus instead. Similarly, there was another case of like huckleberry. If you see that it is actually a name used for several plants in two closely related genera, which is Vaccinium and Galisacea. Few species are present in Vaccinium and few are present in Galisacea. So this is how we are defining their axioms. And similarly, there is another sweet red bell pepper whole. If you see, it's, as I mentioned earlier, that if in case direct taxonomy is not available, then we are going to use food on plant or organism plant term. And in this case, red bell pepper is actually a ripened berry fruit of a bell pepper plant cultivar whose taxonomy isn't available. So we have used this food on term, red bell pepper plant. Another aspect which we are trying to also achieve here is more granularity of terms through addition of lots of new terms in food on, like spinach head, a rosette of a spinach plant, spinach bundle, spinach leaf whole, which is actually a rosette leaf of a spinach plant. We took it from plant ontology. Rosette actually is a group of leaves born at the base of the plant. And similarly, we have introduced spinach bundle, which is an object aggregate and comprised of bundle of raw spinach heads or leaves. Similarly, we have created many new terms. Some of these are mentioned at the bottom. There are many more as well, like mustard green bundle, landcress leaf. And similarly, we have tried to organize these all green leafy vegetable plants. Uh, so till this point, I've explained about how we are creating these basic food whole terms after, first of all, after identifying their anatomical part and also by managing their taxons. So as I mentioned in first slide, that the idea is basically having these primary entity or basic food whole products in food on for basic, these food whole terms in food on for basic food products that are part of organism. So these basic whole terms could be used as a reference term for basic food products, like, for example, pineapple. For that, actually, we have axiomatized the food by quality branch to connect food quality also to it. where we have first identified each basic food that has a quality suffix, which we actually done by creating a keyword in Sparkle like canned in the food product branch. For example, we got a list of pineapple canned, skipjack tuna canned, pudding canned, corn sweet, cream style canned, etc. And then on the next step, we separated out the terms which were multi-ingredient or multi-component terms with the single ingredient terms or basic terms, like pineapple canned, which is a single ingredient food, as we are considering basic foods for now, or skipjack tuna, which actually refers to whole organism. And we have separated out these multiple component food from here. So now we have actually for this pineapple can, we now have a reference term pineapple whole for it, which I actually described earlier. So what after separating out these terms, basic terms with the multi-component terms, we are creating an equivalence class for it in a way that if the food has a basic food whole reference, then it would be equivalent to that food quality class and derives from the basic food from that basic food. Similarly, like so for here, for example, pineapple canned has a pineapple whole as a basic food reference term. So pineapple canned is equivalent to food canned and derives from like some pineapple whole, and which we are actually putting it into the part into plant table in organismal table. We have made like several columns for that, or you can say separate sheets for them. Similarly, for citrus juice can, we have separate class of fruit juice can in food on now and drive, which is derived from some citrus fruit whole. Similarly, that would also go into the part into plant table. For sea turtle egg raw, we have now food raw and derives from some sea turtle egg whole, which will go ultimately into this part into animal table. As I showed earlier, that it is because it's a part of an animal, and if the food is a whole organism, then we are coming up with like food quality and derives from some taxonomy organism, which could be like in, for example, like if this is skipjack tuna canned, like it's referring to whole organism, then it would be like food canned and derives from some skipjack tuna, and it will go into the animal like whole organism, and this whole is developing our food quality table right now. Uh, so after completing these, so this is actually the table how it looks like. This is the food quality, food by quality table, and so this is the column for whole organism, which we are separating out. This is for part references for plants. These are the new terms which we are introducing in food on, and then this is the for part into animals, which where we are adding these, and then these are all the existing food on IDs. After completing these, we'll run robot to generate an OWL file containing the necessary imports, and we can then merge this into foodon to also connect the given foodon quality to particular product. And this will enable actually the subclass of food can, like vegetable can, to accumulate all the subclasses like asparagus canned by inference. This will be applied on other food qualities too. For now, we have covered three major food qualities, which is canned, raw, and dried. So this part into a plant table is near to completion, and we'll be adding in food on soon. And then I'll be started working actively on part into animal side, which is a bit challenging as compared to plants, because in animals, one-to-one mapping is quite difficult comparatively. Other than this, we have also mapped USDA FTC foundation foods in this organismal table. But of course, the single ingredient terms from them, where we have identified which ones are or need to be added to our food on organism material table, like the ones that are especially raw basic commodities, example like kale raw, that would eventually go in our food quality table, and it would be backed up by a reference term kale leaf whole entry in this table. So also based on that, we have created many new terms in this table. And I think that's for now. I remember that Damien also shared this organismal file once in the workgroup.
Right. Yeah.
Or we can share it again.
Available to everybody to check out and comment on. Yeah, and is that it's a ton of work, and it's a crash course in plant anatomy. Anoosha, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
For like sorry, I couldn't exactly get from what perspective are you?
Anything you want to add to your presentation, comment wise, or?
It's just that honestly, I've actually learned plant ontology through this organismal table, because and sometimes we came across many of the terms and challenges where it was beyond my expertise, so there might be, once we'll have these terms in food on, so it will be open for improvement and as per everyone's suggestion. Yeah, I think I'll share the organismal table with all of you. So I'll be really happy if we can improve it more, obviously, with time.
Magali asks, why is it more difficult to extract animal part versus whole? I have some comments about that, but I can address that. Well, what we have for animals besides chickens, and they're in anatomical parts. The poultry area, I think that's a bit simpler, except when it gets down to cuts of meat, which are not anatomical. You won't find them in Uberon, the animal anatomy. Cuts of meat are actually defined differently in different countries. So that's one challenge, to document those for pork and beef and poultry. But the other challenge, which we're actually getting another curator to help with, Amanda has stepped forward to, a food on curator has stepped forward to take a look at the fish list. So fish in the FAO world is about 12,000 fish. The US, the FDA has its own list of fish, seafood, and she has a personal interest in flushing out and making sure our fish list is comprehensive with respect to the FDA list. The problem with fish is that there's so many different common names that are used for the fish that are considered food. And so linking those to taxonomy is tough. Beyond that, though, it's a little bit easier for fish, because once you've got the fish head, you've got the fins, the tail, and fillets, basically. So the next step for the animal side, especially fish, is to create the pattern, the prototype record that we want for each kind of fish. And then to fill in the blanks where Foodon does not have those variations in terminology, the basic ones. And I'll just add one last thing, which is that all of the food items that are canned or dried or raw that Anoosha has been categorizing here came from the Siren database of about 9,600 food products, mainly. And so that's not a comprehensive matrix. That's not every type of vegetable that's been canned, dried, or raw. It's a bit of a smattering of possibilities. So the next step after this basic round of curation occurs would be to identify a patterned or prototype record for each kind of vegetable that we would then try to ensure we have the precomposed terms for all the parts, so that government and industry and other parties can easily have single ID terms to reference the foods. But beyond that, what kinds of foods are canned? Do we need to make sure there's a precompiled canned term for every possible kind of food? That's an open question. Let's open it up to feedback. Do you folks like this direction that Foodon is trying to take on? Would be a basic question.
Damien, I'm not sure if you see it, but there's hands up.
Yeah,
in the
right.
thing
I'm so unused to the
gallery,
hand.
so
So let me do the hand thing here. Warren.
Warren was before me.
Okay, Warren.
Okay, I'm stealing Matthew's thunder, but we have derived from and we have part of.
Mhm. Right.
The crude the crude reality is a lot of times we're trying to mark up things where, for example, once you get the food, once you get a fillet of fish or a certain cut of meat, usually in many cases you end up with a layman's description of it's the flesh of the animal or the fruit.
Yep.
It strikes me that that lends itself very easily to subclassing in terms of this is the part of the animal, this is the flesh of the animal.
Yep.
And if we could possibly reuse that somewhere, I think for a lot of common cases where the information is not available or just not worthwhile, it might be useful to just have that structure there, because it gives us a direct link in between the product and where it came from.
Mhm. Right. So flesh as an anatomical reference does exist in Uberon, and we will move to certainly have that for animal and fish meats. And to that question of derives from versus part of, so I'm considering the anatomical parts in a part of hierarchy. I mean, a hierarchy made out of part of relation, but derives from means some kind of process was applied to that original organism, and what you got out of it was some form of that, but it's not committing to the details of the output. So you'd have to add other statements if you wanted to say that not only was this canned fish derived from some tuna, but it was derived from some tuna and it is the flesh of that tuna. And that implies that there's no bones in the can of fish, for example, deboned. So those processes haven't really got into modeling that in any way, but ultimately that would be good for Foodon to have a little page on the website saying, here's how to ensure that your can of fish is deboned or described as deboned versus with bones in, for example. Okay, does that handle that, Warren?
Yes, I think we're on the same page.
Okay, great. All right, Matthew, next.
Well, thanks. A couple questions. One is, how are you handling varieties in the foods, in the fruits, especially fruits and vegetables? Have you started tackling that?
Just very piecemeal. The Siren database had a handful of apple types, and we've added a few. It would be great.
Okay, so you guys haven't yet. I'm sorry, you guys haven't yet used the database from the International Produce Association?
No.
And all the produce lookup codes. Oh, I just put it in the chat.
Okay.
So that'll give you, that's like 1,500 varieties of fruits and pears. Fruits and vegetables, including types of, and plus those are the links to the commodity codes as they're sold in the store. And that's an international, so that should be good.
Right. So the question is for us, curational stuff, whether we create scripted system to suck in that information and sort of ensure that we've covered the latest version of that kind of a database. So each.
Yeah, I would think you would want to have a regular pull from that and compare it to the Foodon, write a script to do a regular pull from that database. It looks like they want people to just pull that down automatically. I don't know. That's that's above my pay grade, Damien. I'm just here to advise about a few things here and there.
Yeah, yeah. I'm mentioning that. So when we look at approaching a larger database, my first thought is if it's providing a nice little niche patterned source of information, then that we would, instead of doing a manual curation, we'll try a scripted approach to taking it in.
Oh yeah, I would think this lays itself out perfectly for that. I mean, you've got 10 varieties of, or 11 varieties of apples alone, and more than that for pears. So
yeah,
And it's on the store shelf.
yeah.
So that's the ultimate proof that it exists, because
Right.
they're selling it.
yeah. Well, that's the part where Wikipedia intimidates me with its 800 varieties of apple. So if,
Well, like literally go for the low-hanging fruit, like literally, I mean, the fruit that's like, it's below low-hanging, it's like on the shelf,
right. So that's
there for you to grab.
Right. So you're raising in my head that instead of targeting Wikipedia's list of apple species, which might mostly be historic, that going with this producers association, produce association list is a lot more pragmatic and pertinent to our modern day
Absolutely.
food scene.
And structured, yeah. And probably you can map these back. Then you could go to Wikipedia, Wikidata in reverse, essentially, right? You could take this list and go to Wikidata and triangulate on meanings and definitions and things like that.
Okay, thanks for that. Other comments?
I did have one other one, which is I've never been entirely comfortable with derives from. And this is something that Chris Mungle and I sort of debate sometimes, because derives from is rather ambiguous. And as you said, there is some process that has been applied to that thing. In some ways, I feel like processed from might actually be a better relationship definition, or relation type. And maybe I know Chris wants to keep the oboe relation ontology as flat as possible and put the emphasis on the class hierarchies themselves, in the concepts themselves. But in this case, I find derives from to be both ambiguous and academic, and not so easy to operate over. And I think it's one of the things when I interface with people who are interacting with food on, and who are in industry, they're like, what is, that's like one of the first things they say is like, why do I have to deal with, this? Right? They want to go straight to the data. And for them, it's like an extra layer of ambiguity. And so I would encourage rethinking, maybe having some classes or some relationship types that get more at exactly what that meaning is. And I don't know, I don't know if you want to have a discussion about that, but for me, I'm hearing that a lot as a pain point in terms of industry adoption of this.
Yeah, okay, so I'm well aware that derives from is sort of shorthand and shortcut for some set of processes that have been applied to get from here to there. And it does offer very little commitment about exactly what happened. So in a way, we're choosing derives from as a sort of just that, very generic.
Yeah, it's a catch-all.
Catch-all. And the only way to improve on that situation is to start modeling in detail what the processes were that got from the fish to the can.
Right.
And so
Right.
hoping to build that modeling around the qualities. So the fact that it's fish and it's canned, and it's the canning part that you pack in all of the more additional modeling that gives you all of the other constraints that should be happening there, the sterilization and all of that. So the derives from is just a sort of temporary shorthand until all of those other qualities in the food products are modeled out and offer more rich information about what happened. Does that sound
that's
like
actually
strategy?
that's helpful to know that it's temporary and kind of a placeholder.
It's what it's doing is it's offering people just a super basic connection in lieu of fancier modeling about how that food came to be. Now,
Right.
I guess my one point is if people are unsatisfied with the name for that general relation, there's a little thing you can do in very easily in Protégé, which is to not to add a second name and use that as a preferred name in all of the display that you're seeing when you navigate the ontology. So there's a possibility of us adding another term there that rides on top of that.
Right.
I wouldn't want to try to substitute another phrase for that for derives from if that other phrase was equally ambiguous. That's all. But I see your point. Like instead of if you said produced by, produced from, and then that shows a bit of human intentionality there. Perhaps that's what we're after.
Yeah, something. I'm not sure what the answer is. I just wanted to raise that as something that is stymieing industrial adoption.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Okay, great. Yeah, I want to make this terminology friendly and take it outside of the academic box for sure.
Yeah.
So we have another vote for produced from. Okay.
Or I mean, there's produced from, there's processed from. Produced from could when we talk about food production, that generally refers more to farming and even fishing. So I'm not sure produced from would actually be a good solution because that interrupts the larger terms of when we distinguish between food production and food processing. But maybe even processed from or extracted from, or so I think that there are maybe not, without going into detail about the processes, I think that there are maybe a handful of terms that would be just a little more tractable. Things like juiced from, or extracted from, or something like that. But when we started talking about these things in that processing ontology, and I think that's probably where this conversation needs to happen in more detail. I don't want to take up too much time here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Good. Okay. So there are more hands coming. So Francesco, you're next. Francesco.
Okay. Well, just curious about, let's say, the raw or whole concept of vegetables. If you plan or you already did some distinction between, let's say, the whole vegetable consumed as whole, or the vegetable consumed as, for example, already packaged, like processed with some cutting or something like that. Because I don't know if you plan to construct a whole different set of terms, but so if you mean with the whole part the entirety of the apple, for example. But the thing is that if you buy an apple already peeled, for example, is it whole or is it something else?
Right. And this is the distinction we're at.
Because from the security, from the food security, I think could make a quite big difference, let's say, also maybe from the nutritional point of view.
Right. So the objective in using the word whole in brackets after a food term is to is to emphasize that we're speaking of anatomical wholes here. So, for example, if I just use the word apple to you, we've got, I need some apples for this apple crisp. Sort of a default that the apples are going to come with their skin on, and then I'm going to peel them, and then I'll have an unpeeled apple. We're just adding the word whole there to emphasize that the whole anatomical apple is being referenced, rather than apple in any form. So that, but that carries through to some other questions. So, for example, a broccoli head. Is it sufficient just to call it a broccoli head that we're serving up, or that we're buying? Or do we have to tack on the word whole on the end of that too? And that was a question I was going to throw out to the group, in terms of naming consistency. The fact that the head is a term used to reference the whole flowering structure, it seems to me carries enough anatomical weight to make sure that the computation reference is actually pointing to the whole thing. So does that help? That it's the word whole means referencing.
Yes, yes. I understand that you referenced the whole concrete, let's say, anatomical part, not for example a juice, or not for example a processed product from the apple.
Yeah, nothing has been done to that apple, and so. And then after that, we can have compiled terms such as apple sliced. And you'd never call that whole anymore. You might call the slices whole slices, but.
Or you can say that we're probably single anatomical part we are discussing about, like it shouldn't be like, as Damien said, that slice, like it shouldn't be like further divided, like for example whole parsley leaves. It means we are talking about the whole leaf. So it's actually referring to like whole anatomical part, not whole plant or animal.
NCBI taxon references are by default semantically, I've been told, pointing to the whole organism, not just some part of it. So that's why we don't have the word whole stuck on the end of the taxonomic thing. But okay, other questions? Anything else, Francesco?
No, it's fine. Thank you.
So Naomi.
Yes, thank you. I know we're up at the hour, but wearing the Nutrition Food Data Central hat, two things I wanted to sort of comment on to just bring it into, to put it into everyone's radar, is that for Dr. Yang's terms with respect to trying to integrate epidemiology and into food on, or its relationship to intake and health, then perhaps reaching out to the Food Surveys Research Group or the people who are on our call today, such as Jaspri, Ahuja, and Hande, might be able to bridge that sort of vocabulary and use of terms such that they're somewhat harmonized. And then the second thing I wanted to ask of Matthew about was that list of PLU codes. How would you reconcile working that into the fact that we use GPC codes for a significant amount or all of the branded foods database? And I know we record PLU codes also, but this would be another thing that would be important in terms of trying to connect data sets with respect to food, where it comes from, and tracking them for food safety reasons, or even for nutritional content reasons. And finally, the last thing was, I do think that Anoosha is part of our calls, but tying into Tarina's work on quotes processing and what is raw versus whole versus dried versus frozen, is really quite key to, again, try to achieve some harmony. That's it. We don't have to discuss it all. I just wanted to put it down.
Right. Yeah. So indeed, all these raw cases that are coming up and dried that Anoosha and the Siren database have, we have to fact check them against our model of that. But over to you, Matthew, for that that question that Naomi pitched about GPC and PLU.
That's a great question. I think here's a quick answer, and I put my email in the chat so we can have a more detailed conversation about it. I would say that the first thing I would do is look for, you mentioned you have some PLU codes and the producer code, I mean the packaged goods codes. So certainly that's like 30 seconds to do that matching in a database to crosswalk those things. And then you do the opposite, right? You see what's left over in the PLU codes that aren't in the other code base that you have, just to look. And maybe that you should be using another database and exists a crosswalk somewhere else. And I would be willing to bet that the Produce Marketing Association or somebody has those. But again, probably better if we discuss this further since we are out of time here. And you're right, I think this does reach right into the processing. I think there's going to be a lot of questions and clarity that comes from that processing working group.
Okay, and on that note, the processing subgroup is meeting roughly once a month and staggered with this meeting. So I'll send out a schedule about how that's happening into the future. And with that, shall we bring it to a close for this month? And thank everybody, Anoosha and Chen, for presenting. And please add to the agenda. We don't have any other presentations lined up into the spring, so all welcome to provide some kind of report or update on your own work and interact and joint ontology questions to bring up. Okay, thanks a lot, folks.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your wonderful suggestions. We'll definitely work towards it.
Thank you, folks. Bye-bye. See you in a month then.
Thank you. Bye.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks. Bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks.